Good Sunday afternoon. How's everybody doing? I hope good. It's been a lot of changes here in the world, always continuously happening. So, yeah, I wanted to talk today, and my favorite expression is always, the earth is the soul cauldron. It's stuck on spin cycle. And of course, we're in the wash machine of experience, right? And the egos and you know, I guess life force is the detergent and the water. So it's, something I wanted to talk about for a long time because it kind of literally equals what's happening in the astrology lately. And there's a lot going on here. And I've been mentioning an awful lot about Uranus going over Alcyon. Well, that's actually clocking in right at the end of this month on the 29th of October. And for you siderealists, meaning the sidereal astrologies, it's happening at about 6 degrees, 8 minutes sidereal astrology. Now, tropical astrology is going to see that at about 0 degrees, 21 minutes. Doesn't matter which one you look at. And again, what does this all mean in plain English? Again, I've mentioned this many times. Last time it happened, World War II. Before that, the Civil War. Before that, the Revolutionary War in the United States. Now, if you look back through history, which I have, we always see major calamities and major changes, but they're never the same. And this one is so much different. And that's why I actually think when I add this Neptune Saturn conjunction, which is going to happen in February, this actually might be a time, even though it's going to be crazy, I think there's a lot of enlightenment going on, a lot of conscious breakthrough. And, somebody had mentioned a comment here right before I got online, and they were saying, Jeff, isn't it obvious that the sun charges the moon, and that the sun is the you could say vital force through the planets. And I have to agree that I think it is. I think the sun and the stars are portals, and the planets might be also portals into the connections of the soul roots that are here on Earth. And it's really a big matrix of energy that's interplaying. And of course, astrologers are always looking at, aspects, trines, conjunctions, all these complex configurations of geometry. But really, when you come back to the center and you say, well, what do you do with all this information? As I do a lot of readings, and I'm always finding the more, I evolve in my life, I'm trying to put it into a practical utility. And there's one thing that I think astrologers leave out, and I think we all do when we first start studying astrology, and that is your mind, your consciousness. That's one of the most powerful things in the universe, because yes, astrology is the art of time and phases, just like this Uranus coming over Alcyon. It always affects energy and modulates it in different ways. But there's one constant, and this is something that I think is very, very much overlooked, and that is common sense in our mind. In other words, how do we react? I've talked about this a lot before. But the power of reaction and the power of how you utilize this energy, not through superstition, but through common sense, like, okay, this is happening to me. What do I do? And it can be anything literally under the sun. I've seen health issues. I've seen legal issues. I've seen, family issues or other issues like the world, right? Or we're all in some situations that ebb and flow throughout our lives. What's interesting is how accurately the astrology shows this. Just like in the world right now, look what we've got going on. We got riots. We got this total dissension going on, not only in the United States, but look at what's happening around the world. I was just on the phone the other night with a person in Australia, and the person says, oh my God, they won't give me access to my money because I didn't agree to the digital ID. So they had to use a different credit card. And I'm like, wow. And I'm hearing the same thing in Europe. Ireland has been going through a lot of issues. The UK, Germany, and it's really fun because I get to talk to a lot of people in a lot of different places on this planet. So we see the insanity that's going on. But if you look back through time, and this is, I always, mention my grandmother, who I just cherished. I had the best relationship with her. She was so cool. Born in 1907. And we would talk about all these different experiences that she had had, because she saw World War I as a kid. She saw the Great Dust Bowl. She saw, the Great Depression. I don't know what was so great about it, but it was horrible. And of course, World War II and all the way on out, died in, 2009. And it's fun to talk to your relatives and ancestors, and older people, because when you look back, you realize the world has always been insane. It's just been insane in different ways. That's why I call it the soul cauldron. That was my, thumbnail for today. And it is. We are really here as experiencers. And, in a lot of ways, we're all kind of looking back and saying, well, geez, it's just been hard. That's been difficult. But really, life does happen for us, not to us. And if we look at it from that perspective, I think you react a totally different way. And, I wanted to talk about a lot of the energies that are going on this month. Like we have Mercury is going to conjunct Mars on the 20th of October. And we've also got a Sun square Jupiter on the 16th. When you look at the astrology, you say, well, okay, these energies are powerful, but it hits everybody totally different. And if you analyze your birth chart and how these configurations line up with it, it's eerily accurate how it manifests in positive or negative or points in between with all of us. And it's never the same for anybody. So this is what I wanted to talk about today, is really focusing on our ability to react. And, again, I really get lucky. I get to see how the astrology correlates in readings with every individual. Like I spend 30, 40 minutes before I get on a reading. And I'm always looking at, wow, okay, I'll look at the emails and I'll look at the cycles. And then when I get in the session, and I love Zoom because Zoom allows us to record everything and you can play it back. And what's interesting is when I get done with the reading, the biggest benefit and gain was that person understanding the energies that were on them. You see, I always use the analogy of driving a car. You do not look at your speedometer or your RPM to tell you how fast to go, right? No, you look at it to see how fast you're going. And that's just one analogy. So I like to look at astrology kind of backwards in a lot of ways. Like, okay, I'm on a trajectory. It's like taking a journey, right? You don't ask the map where you're going, right? You look at the map to see how to get there. You see, and that's I think, much more intelligent way to approach all this stuff, because astrology's had such a huge backlash from religions. Oh, it's the work of the devil, right? Well, then why do almost all of the very kind of, you could say, upper echelon business people and people in government really pay attention to it? The other night, I went to Carol Reiter's birthday party. Now, of course, Carol Reiters is deceased, but his house, he still has astrologers over there. And I went to it. It was a great talk. And I don't have any pictures to put up, but it was a really interesting thing, because Carol Reiter was a consultant to many celebrities. And one of the ones that we've heard about the most is Ronald Reagan. Everybody said, oh, it was Nancy Reagan. I said, no, it was Ronald Reagan. Why? Because they didn't want the public to know that Ronald was that much into astrology. So Nancy was the scapegoat. But very interesting, and some really good people there. And we had the birthday cake and everything. And so it was a lot of fun. But to this person's comment, I really think the heavens, or if you will, the stars and the planets are portals. Even though they're round objects, or whatever you want to say, and the flat earthers will say, no, they're projections. But whatever they are, I'll say this, that they certainly seem to interact in human life and in the effects of the world, particularly the moon. By the way, we got a third quarter moon. It's going to happen tomorrow, Pacific time, at about 11:13 a.m. And of course, this is the cool thing. Every 2 weeks, you're going to get either a new moon or a full moon. And of course, every week, you're going to get a quarter. This is the timer of the month. And it is the modulator. And the moon is extremely important, no doubt about it. but it's the outer planets. And I find the conjunctions of the major planets that really bring the shifts in the world. And we got a big one coming up. And this is the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which is going to happen in February. I've mentioned this a lot. And the reason that's so important is because it's also happening while this Uranus is going through the Pleiades, but particularly Alcyon. And someone had mentioned last podcast that I did, and that they went to Machu Picchu. I forget who it was, but they said they did a meditation. And in the meditation, they ended up at Alcyon. Again, these stars, in my opinion, are portals. I always show this here. I'll see if I can't bring my computer to share the screen again. And I'll just take a second and show this. The this is a diagram that I show an awful lot. And I love this diagram because this is actually something I created out of an amalgam of different diagrams over 35, 40 years ago, something like that, probably 35 years ago. And I always mention, divinity, God, whatever you want to say, is way up here, right? And the souls are believed to be created, or the fabric of souls seems to be up here. Again, there's no astrology up here. And they claim there's 49 dimensions, 49 subdimensions up here. The big red dashed line is the division where spirit gets concretized into matter. And that's a much bigger topic than just us. When we look at the universes and the gas clouds and the, rotating galaxies and the amino acids and all the building blocks of life, they literally say that this is the formation of matter from spirit. And again, I always talk about the legends of the evil spirits were cast down, and many different religions have this, legend. And of course, the Garden of Eden is probably one of the most, elucidated ones. But the Bhagavad Gita and many other texts talk about the Egyptians, so on and so forth. And what's interesting about that is if you examine an atom or any molecular structures in physics, you'll come down to positive and negative charges and particles. And plain English is this always brings us to everything here is just energy. It's all energy raining down. And what's interesting about astrology, I'm hoping in the future, astrology becomes more of a science. I was at a party last night that was really exciting. It was called the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. And you might say, well, what is that? Well, this is all these celebrities and different people getting together who are really trying to bring out the UFO or UAP, whatever you want to call it, the extraterrestrial phenomena. And there was a guy there last night. His name was Michael Schratt. And I want to have him on the podcast. I'm going to try and get him on next week or the following week if he's free. And what a great presentation he did. He was talking about how all these phenomena of, extraterrestrial, and of course, a lot of people are interested in this stuff. You watch the History Channel, right? Skinwalker Ranch is just one of them. And I know a lot of those guys who are on that. Fun stuff. And what was great about this presentation last night is he was talking about, here, I'll put this on the screen, where as far back as 1347 BC, there's documented evidences in the Nile River of Egypt of, Akhenaten saw a flying disc. And then he went on to talk about all these different phenomena which would happen, through the 1800s. He was talking about the Romans in 100 BC had reported, this is all documented stuff, seeing saucers. And this goes back to the beginning of time. Well, to take it even further, the Vedas talk about this. They talk about all this extraterrestrial life that's interacting. And this is stuff that goes back thousands of years. So this is nothing new. And of course, Egypt has long been a topic of, okay, extraterrestrials were here. Did they create the pyramids, etc., and many of these other things. And of course, when you look deeper and deeper, you see that we're probably not alone. And one of the things that he had brought up, his presentation was amazing. That's why I want to have him on and talk about it. But he brought up some really compelling things, how our government may be very familiar with this. This is a picture, of course, of the U.S. FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, in 1958, and how there was literally all these reports. The sailors had seen this craft shining right over, and there's so many documented cases. And there was one, and I didn't have the picture, but they literally said they were testing. I think this was in the 50s or late 40s, and this craft landed right on the Edwards Air Force Base, just landed right there. And they had footage of it. They were literally filming it. And all these people had testified, look, we got the footage, right? Well, it got buried, just like Indiana Jones. Remember how they took the Ark of the Covenant and put it in that big warehouse? Same thing. They bury all this stuff. They do not want us to know. So it's really exciting with the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance that you get some really smart people who have overwhelmingly documented that the government has been hiding this stuff. Well, where am I going with all this? Well, that's why I say the earth is the soul cauldron. And I don't think it's just our souls. I think it's many different types of souls. I mean, when you look at the human life, the alien life, the animal life, the plant life, and they say even the minerals are ensouled with energies. So this is literally one place where I would have to say it's the magic of spirit concretizing into matter. And they actually say in the womb of the mother that a garment is made for the soul. And that happens in all life, you know, that becomes manifest in mammals or reptilians or what have you. And look at plant life, the same thing. You know, the seed turns into a garment of a plant life, you know, or whatever other manifestation it is. So when you really get away from the news and all the politics and all the crazy stuff, right, you really see the magic of this place. I always say I love the human race. It's just the people and their insanity that drives me crazy, right? So, but anyhow, so fascinating, this presentation. He was even showing how Area 51 has craft in it. Some of it, they say, is stuff we're building. Other stuff is quite possibly the crashes. And I personally can attest, I was actually years ago, God, this has to be 25 years ago now, a friend of mine has a gold mine up north of Pahrump, Nevada. So we drove. It's hotter than heck, right? All the desert. And I get up there and I climbed up to the top of this, you know, mountain. And I'm sitting up there looking around because you could see across all these deserts. And all of a sudden I see these crafts just hovering, right? And they're making all these unusual movements, not like a plane, like it didn't bank and, you know, they're just going like this. And then they would hover and go down. And it was in the distance. It was probably 20 miles away. They weren't big. And I said to my friend, I said, what is that over there? I said, it looks like some kind of a base. He said, oh, that's Area 51. I went, wow, that's pretty cool. You can't get close to it. Apparently, they'll lock you up and put you in leg irons and handcuffs, throw you in the deepest hole in the earth if you get next to it. But what was fun is I was able to see it from a distance. And it was, you know, I can attest those weren't planes like we see. And so our government has been intertwined with this stuff. And I think many governments have. And I think this earth is a lot deeper than we know. Even though we see the human wars and all the crazy stuff going on, there's a lot of interesting phenomena. But back to the topic that I wanted to hit on today, and this is where I really find it's actually a real honor for me. You know, I've always been trying to get away from astrology in my younger years, but I'm finding now it's really a blessing for me to do readings for people because I actually get to see, and the more I do this, I'm wrapping my head around how to put this into plain English for people. You know, when people do readings, especially people not familiar with astrology, you hear all this heady terminology. You know, it's like, oh, this is squaring that, trining this, or you got this yoga, or you got that, and people's eyeballs cross. You know, I know mine did when I was studying this thing for the last 50 years. But I'm finding when you put it in plain English and translate this into something that someone can actually utilize as a practical tool, because astrology is really about time. And this is why I loved Vedic astrology, because, which is really called Jyotisha. You know, Jyotisha is actually a pop term. A friend of mine who's now passed, many people may have heard of him. His name was Chakrapani. Chakrapani came from India. And he might be the guy, he died in his 80s. He might be the guy who coined the phrase Vedic astrology. He said, you know, Americans are never going to know what Jyotisha means. Jyotisha means the science of the light of the soul. And in my opinion, it really is. And it's really the journey of the soul in time and space. And I think one of my biggest criticisms of many of the spiritual and, well, spiritual is okay, but some of the religions, not all of them, have failed to, I think, really make us realize in a practical sense that we're only here for a very short time. I mean, how many pets have we seen die or loved ones pass away? Nobody's going to be here forever. We're in an arc of a journey from birth to maturity to, wisdom and atrophy and death. And I think the more we realize that, nobody takes anything with them. I know, I see all the lawsuits, right? Don't we all? And what's so, I think, important to realize here is astrology is a tool for energy and time. And that's the key. And I can tell you the world right now, the soul cauldron, is coming to some really powerful changes. And I actually think in a positive way. Now, obviously, we've always got negativity coming in. One of the biggest, I think, things that's going to be a challenge for humanity in the future is going to be AI. Even though AI is amazing, in fact, a lot of these pictures I was showing you here, that was actually created with AI. They took the renderings and drawings from newspaper clippings and also descriptions of people, and they rendered them, and really interesting stuff, how you could visualize these things. And I'm actually going to do some AI renderings of many of the UFO experiences I've had, motorcycles being shut down. I've seen some really bizarre stuff, and I'm going to render that stuff so I can talk more about that in the future. And anyways, what AI scares everybody about is as everyone's data gets logged in, and more importantly, the control systems of government in military and of course in just social systems, banking systems, etc. We're literally, quite possibly, creating a double-edged sword where it's a digital prison. And at the same time, it is facilitating and helping us manage the complexities of society. And that's dangerous. And then when you start factoring in robotics, I mean, if you think we're not going to see robotics in our lives, cleaning our houses, doing manual maintenance, I'm hearing all the time, oh, well, we need more laborers. Nobody wants to work anymore, right? They all are doing technical jobs or becoming doctors, lawyers, and what have you, which is fine. But we're not getting the laborers, the electricians, the welders, the builders, the mechanics, all these things. People aren't going into these fields as much. Well, what do you think they're going to be doing? They're going to be creating any kind of an android or robot or system that could be programmed to do that, and it's going to replace us. So we're moving into the future. I think one of the, again, I've mentioned this many times, one of the most, I think, compelling scenes I've ever seen in a movie about this subject was Terminator 2. I always encourage people, everybody's probably seen it, but if you haven't, go watch it. It's a great movie. And again, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and amazing. And the ending scene, it was so touching because, this kid, John Connor, had befriended, the robot, which of course was played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. And at the very end, he had to be destroyed. And, I always play that.
I know now why you cry. But it's something I can never do.
The audio's a little bit quiet there, but it's true. I mean, I can tell you, we are emotional, spiritual beings having a physical experience. You ain't never going to get a robot or a droid or AI to have compassion unless it's programmed to do so. And even then, it's just a program. We actually feel things. We actually have love and emotion and hate and all these emotions that we have. And this is the magic of life. And that is a spirit. That's a soul. You can't get that in a computer. You could program it to act like it has it, but you'll never have it. It won't innate have it. Now, some people will argue with me and say, well, but we have torsional waves going around and it can think and reason and all that. That's true. But what's scary is how smart they're getting. I mean, I've been watching some of the stuff here that's going on in robotics. People have been telling me who are in that business. It's creepy how advanced it is getting. So, we're in a world of change here. And what's interesting is it really shines a light on humanity's spirituality, who we really are. When you look at someone who's angry and full of hate, well, a lot of times it's deep buried emotions, you see. Not always, but a lot of times, some people actually get real evil. And this is the mysteries of the human mind, which is, again, of great interest to me because, when you get astrology readings, I always tell people, you're in the middle. You're the person in the middle. It's the astrology is not you, and it's never going to be. You're not your sun sign. You're not your moon sign. You're not your ascendant. All these things that modern astrology likes to identify us with. No, that's a trait that we had when we were tied into the body at first breath. They literally say when the garment is prepared in the mother's womb and we exit into the air of the world and draw that first breath, that's when the angel ties the spirit, psyche, and soul permanently to the body. And we're blocked with this mark of silence, which is just a mark. But they say that that's when we're blocked from full access to the subconscious mind and the spirit. So, and again, this is what religions talk about when they talk about, your conscience, your innate common sense, all these things that we use words for to try and identify who we are, and everyone has a different compass of morality. Some people are evil, and you got to identify them too. Some people are very confused. Some people are really advanced souls. And it's interesting how in Vedic astrology, you can really get indicators of that. You can see past life traits. You can also see general emotional traits. Like if you see very severe yogas and aspects, that means that person is probably going through some very severe issues in that area of life, whether it's emotionally or physically or environmentally, relationships, right? That's a big one. And it's amazing how accurate it is. It's so accurate, it's creepy. But again, what do you do with all this information? It's, again, what they'll tell you in any business situation. That's why we make business plans, right? That's why we set goals. That's why military has intelligence, governments, all this. We're always seeking to gather knowledge. Just, again, like a map. If you're going somewhere, you get a map, right? Whether you're using Siri or you're using a piece of paper like we used to do, remember those? And you plan your journey. And you say, well, how am I going to get there? Whether you're driving or flying or whatever, you're going to have to navigate your, location on this physical earth. Well, it's the same way in astrology. We're all navigating and going through our phases and cycles. And I always try and keep that to where, how can we practically use this? One of my favorite books, I don't know where the heck it is. It's somewhere back here, but it was called The Beginning of Wisdom. It was written by a rabbi in the 11th century known as Rabbi Ibn Ezra. And to the religious critics, I always say, well, he was the one who wrote the commentary in the Bibles that we all have, right? So, and what was so profound about him, and I find this about many ancient astrologers, they wouldn't sit there and rattle off all the astrological details. They would take that information, put it into practical, utility. Like, they saw an interrogation where two people are going to fight. Well, that's usually because the aspects were square or opposition or hitting some malefic thing or, etc. So astrology is a language that you have to put into plain English. And that's the art. And that's taken me many, many years to, I think, realize the significance of that, because we're all relating to emotion. We're all relating to some way that we can wrap our lower conscious minds around. Can we use this information, right? If you can't use it, what good is it, right? So you got to be able to make sense of life. And again, I don't think anything will give us the total answer other than our final personal rationalizations of how we emotionally and intellectually deal with something. That's when I think when we get those aha moments, that when it makes sense. Well, back to the world, right now we're seeing a real polarization between good and evil. And I think this Uranus over Alcyon is very, very powerful because, again, when you look back in history, every time this has happened, again, I put this on the screen many times, but these are the seven sisters. There's actually a little bit more, but it's a star cluster called the Pleiades. And Uranus is going to retrograde back and hit Alcyon right literally on the 29th approximately, and it's slow. Uranus is very slow. It's retrograding. So you'll feel this days before, like a week before, and potentially up to a week after. And then it's going to station and go direct and come back and do it again when? This coming May. In fact, it will probably come back right around May 2nd and hit it again. So, and we've got this Neptune Saturn coming together. And I've done checking on this. This hasn't happened in this particular way, in that degree of the zodiac, for probably close to, best I can see, 12,000 or more years. Some astrologers have said up to 25 or 26,000 years. They may be right. So this is profound stuff. And I also notice the exact degree that these conjunctions happen in are really profound. In fact, this degree that Uranus is conjuncting that star Alcyon, which I believe are portals to the upper heavens, is really called the degree of illumination and tranquility. So even though the world's in chaos, there's a lot of, you could say, centering and consciousness that might wake up. In other words, people are getting more self-aware of the constant inundation of the media. And of course, social media is full of podcasts. Some are great, some aren't. Some are disinformation, some aren't. So we're getting inundated with this information that never stops. And I think what's useful about that is it's actually waking us up. So this is kind of fun stuff when you look at it. I want to come back and look at some of the questions here and comments here. Yeah. So somebody's mentioning here, a gentleman named Michael. He's saying, I remember astral traveling in my younger years, feeling myself coming back into my body before waking up. As a little scary. Yeah, that's interesting. I always talk about these books, particularly the Magus of Strovolos, which, you vicariously kind of get to read through Markides' books, how he would do astral travel and go into these various different dimensions, particularly dimensions where disincarnate souls, which we call dead people, right, and ghosts would be. And he would say that these consciousnesses would look like smoking tires in a clear atmosphere. He'd descend down into them. And many people will create what he calls a psychonoetic dimension, or a reality structure, is another way to say it, of how you were when you were alive. This is why ghosts haunt places. I find when I do clearings on buildings and people, the disincarnate soul that's involved doesn't even know that they're disincarnate. They don't know. This is why they haunt a place. And of course, this is titillating on a lot of reality shows. Everybody's measuring the, which is fine, the temperature changes and all that. But, really what you're dealing with is a disincarnate soul that doesn't even know that they're not alive anymore. And they haunt places. And the biggest one is they actually can attach to people's aura. This is known as possession. And if anyone thinks that's not real, let me tell you, read 30 Years Among the Dead, Freeing the Captives, and The Unquiet Dead by Dr. Edith Fiore. These are just a couple of books that talk about clinically documented medical cases and psychiatric cases where they've cleared people of these attachments. I've literally seen where you can't reason with some of the real evil ones. They're really possessed by the auric, you could say, field of their belief system. And, this is an interesting topic because you say, well, if the body's gone, how could there be a mind? Well, you don't need a mind. Consciousness is outside of the gray matter in the brain, or I should say a brain. Because, again, I always show that diagram where there's layers. In Vedic astrology, they actually talk about the human aura. And you can see here, it's a little bit small, but you have the physical sheath, which is called the guff or the kaistra in Vedic astrology, but it's just a physical body. And the next layer of the aura is also often referred to as the etheric double. It's a replica. And this is where disease can get blocked from, or disease happens because it gets blocked. And this is why I talk about reflexology a lot. In acupuncture, it opens up the meridians to let the life force energy into the physical body. The next layer out is often sometimes referred to as the psychic double, which is permeated with our thought forms. And the final outer one here, even though I'm using different colors on this diagram, is known as the karmic sheath, which is interesting because what is it? It's Saturn. Saturn is the karmic sheath. And anybody talking or getting a reading on astrology, the first thing astrologers look at is where is Saturn, the karmic releaser. And of course, there's many different techniques to look at that, which is it's amazing, the phases. And that's where the 7-year itch comes. Every 7 years, Saturn approximately goes through a quarter of the chart. It's a little bit more than that, but not much. It's pretty much like that. 7 times 4 is 28. Even the moon goes around the earth in approximately that time phase to catch back up to where it was. So notice this is also a cool thing. In Sanskrit, Tamil, and Dravidian, they often refer to planets as graha. And graha also means seizer or grasper of the aura. That's why I always say, forget Trinity, Neo, and Morpheus. Not that it wasn't a great movie, right? But really, this is the matrix of the soul, which is time. Everything's about time, right? And time itself is an illusion in a lot of ways, but it's very real. Call me on the first of the month, right? And look in the mirror every year. We all get a little older, don't we? So the point is time is an experience rather than an illusion. And it is, because that's maybe a more preferable way to say that. So, but yeah, astral travel is such a cool thing. And I think we're all immensely capable of it. We've just been programmed to not think that way. Again, I'm always amazed at little kids. I just love their innocence and their purity. My brother was telling me that his little grandson was with him, and he's on the other side of the lake from where we grew up, way up in northern Wisconsin. And his little grandson says, "Daddy, there's 3 ghosts in that house over there. That was the house we grew up." So pretty wild. And he was, my brother's like, "Wow, well, this is amazing." So, and I see this all the time. And again, I talked about the so-called, autistic kids, where I had that lady on. It was amazing with her son, talking about how they could talk to animals, and it was verified. A horse died, and they verified that the horse's name, which even told by the horse to the autistic child, which I hate to use that word autistic because they're really not. They're just blocked from developing their lower conscious mind in the same way that we did with the normal 5 senses. Of course, we call it normal. Maybe it's not, right? But it is what we all develop in. And the mind is really a conduit to and from the spirit. It's amazing stuff. So anyways, yeah, a lot of great stuff that people are someone saying here, when will this insanity stop? I don't think it ever does in the world. Though I think it evolves. They say, in a couple thousand years, we're going to hit the silver age, and then we hit the so-called golden age, which is when our solar system goes into the galactic center, which seems to be a point where a very high level of consciousness, goes through. And of course, we're hearing about this asteroid coming. There's, always things that have been coming around this planet in phases. And, a lot of some of the older astrologers back in the medieval times actually said that these plagues were often associated with comets and omens, which we don't know if they're really comets or could they be some kind of craft. There's a real possibility of that. A lot of interesting stuff. So I don't know that the insanity of the world ever completely stops. I think it's the soul cauldron. I really do. I think we're here, and there's all different levels of sanity and insanity when you really examine it. And there's so much lying in history. You look at Tartaria, you look at, again, the UFO phenomena or UAP, whatever you want to call it, right? Extraterrestrial. There's overwhelming evidence. I mean, I could sit here and rattle off so many experiences that I've had, like physically have had, like we're talking missing time. And again, vehicle shut down, my motorcycle shut down. Absolutely amazing stuff. So anyways, yeah, somebody's talking about Reagan here. Yeah, with astrology, yeah, Reagan was really into it. And Carol Reiter was a really interesting astrologer. He used to have meetings with Reagan all the time. When he was governor, they'd meet over at Nate Nell's in Beverly Hills, and of course, I'm sure a lot on the phone. So, anyways, a lot of great comments here, and people are talking about a lot of different things here. Yeah, someone's saying here, we are celestial beings having an etheric path on this earth. Yeah, I would agree with that. You know, these physical bodies and even genetics itself is stunning. I mean, when you think about the garment that's formed in the womb of a mother or an animal, or even the genetics in a seed, you can throw a seed on the shelf for 50 years, 30 years, and put it in the ground with a little water and it ignites. It's absolutely magical. The earth is a grounding rod. If anyone's been around electricity or studied it, you know, you can grab 1,000 volts. If you have no grounding whatsoever, you won't get shocked. I would not recommend that because you can get killed at 1,000 volts. You can get killed at 12 volts if you're grounded sufficiently enough. So it's interesting how the earth is a place of dissipation. There's something much more deep about this planet and others that I think experience have on, that we have experiences on in different realms. But I have to say, it's a grounding rod. It is where time and space manifests. And it's also where karma manifests out. And it can be good and ill. And you usually get a little bit of both. You know, I've seen so many things in Vedic astrology where certain individuals may actually be here acting as a grounding rod for family or karmas in certain relationships. In other words, they're like a surrogate that's grounding it out. It's like a grounding wire. And they're taking on a lot of experiences, some of them not pleasant either, I got to tell you, that are playing out or dissipating this energy. And it's all about the mind. It's all about consciousness and where we put our focus. That is the key, in my opinion, to life, because life happens for us to understand that. And I think we keep reincarnating until we get that. That's what it shows. It shows the earth is a soul cauldron. We keep coming here and experiencing. And, you know, even though life is very important, you know, we all got our jobs, we all got our whatever, you know, our responsibilities, our loved ones. But in the end, you come in here with nothing and you leave with nothing. You will not take a single thing with you, not even this body, except your conscious self-awareness. And that's something that I don't think we look at enough. And it's extremely important. You know, many people will study different courses, and Tony Robbins, and, you know, the famous one was Napoleon Hill, right? Think and Grow Rich, right? It's all about getting rich, which there's nothing wrong with getting rich. And I'm amazed at how rich some people get. And I'm also amazed at how broke some people get. And these yogas are actually shown in the chart of immense wealth. I looked at so many different charts, and these are actually yogas that are in there. But that doesn't end up whether that person gets more conscious or not. They were just playing a role. Again, the earth is a grounding rod. They were playing a role. They were a spoke in the wheel of time and experience and this whole collective consciousness of all of us. But each of us individually are in our own movie. Shakespeare was right. The whole world's a stage. We're the actors. And the movie we're playing is really our perception of reality. And the exit out of the theater is death. And then if we don't get that movie or grow in consciousness, we're going to come back to another one or a sequel maybe. And the sequels sometimes aren't as good as the originals, are they? But I think in this case they might be. But anyways, a lot of, or let's hope they are. So really cool comments here. Someone said, growing up, I didn't meet anybody that was an experiencer, not one. And I was made fun of unmercifully, and now millions wonder why. So it sounds like this is Victoria. So it sounds like she was being made fun of, if I understand this comment correctly. Yeah, you bet. Oh, yeah, you bet. I remember back in the 60s, everybody's making fun of it, right? And I have to tell you, it was really amazing. You know, I went with Camille to this HDR, which is Hollywood Disclosure thing. And it's really amazing the amount of intelligent people I've met One was Dr. Lear. I think I had put up his picture. I don't know if I have it anymore. But Dr. Lear was really an interesting guy. He was a surgeon, and he was removing implants from people that had claimed they'd been abducted and had certain health issues. And, people, would roll their eyes at this, except Dr. Lear was literally getting laboratory tests back with the metals and the different things that were in it. It's stunning. It's stunning. Camille can talk a lot about that one because she's had, stuff in her teeth. I personally have never had any of that stuff, but, a lot of people get made fun of in this thing, the little green men and all that stuff. But the military is riddled with people. There was a great book called Left at Eastgate, and I had met the author, and he was in the military over in Europe, where all these people in the military, officers and such, had seen this craft come down. And right after that, all the nukes that weren't supposed to be there were being removed with cement trucks and all this equipment. So a lot of interesting things. And I've done actually studies on this. I was actually commissioned to do a study on all these different paranormal and UFO phenomena by George Parks. He was the leader of the Tucson Mutual UFO network called MUFON. And I have the whole study. It's absolutely amazing. I worked with remote viewers on this stuff, many different groups too. And fascinating how we've seen the correlations of you could say, alignments to some of these phenomena. That's why I think they're portals. I really do. I think the planets are portals. And a lot more may come through than just the interaction on us. I think it's happening in the world. And some of these civilizations, I think, are exceedingly advanced. And I also think we've got demonics here, too. So it's a really complex situation. But one of the things that I have to say is the fact that we're all drawing breath and able to live out the karmic journey of our lives is proof that this place is divine, and it's very protected, even though crazy stuff goes on. A lot of deaths, a lot of hurricanes, a lot of wars, all this stuff, right? But creation keeps happening, and I think there's a lot to that. So someone's mentioning here, and sorry you're getting made fun of, because a lot of people have been made fun of. And then there's actually scientific proof to that effect. So, and that whole thing last night that I went to see was really amazing. And I just had highlights from this. By the way, he was talking about, I think it was one of the, in 1874 in Oaxaca, Mexico, there was a giant trumpet that everyone had seen. And, when you talk about something like that, people would laugh at that, right? I actually saw two gigantic torches between Gila Bend and the 8. There's in Arizona, there's the 10 freeway, the Interstate 10, and then there's the 8 south of that, which runs along the Mexican border. And I always took that shortcut. And I was pulling a trailer late at night, about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I saw these two gigantic, almost look like Roman torches connected in the middle with flames coming out of the top. And I'm going, wait a minute. I don't drink. Okay, don't do drugs. So I'm like, what is this? And I actually had a flip phone, because this was like 20 something years ago. And I took pictures of it, and the flip phone, before I could back it up somehow, it actually broke. But I know what I saw, and I saw it a couple of times, and it was actually moving up there. So and a lot of people have reported stuff like this, and they get made fun of. They get, oh yeah, you're delusional, right? Little green man and all this stuff. Well, it's all coming out, and that might be what this Saturn Neptune does here, coming up in February forward. You see, you got to remember, great conjunctions of planets. We've got Saturn and Neptune conjoining in a very unusual configuration in the very first tropical degree of Aries. And again, for you tropical astrologers, there is efficacy to it. Even though the Vedic astrologers all sit there and say, well, it's the only real zodiac. Well, I think there's a lot of zodiacs, and there's a lot of secret zodiacs too that actually reference different fixed stars. Draco is one of them. Very interesting stuff. And the secret societies knew a lot about this. There's a lot of hidden zodiacs. So for anyone to beat their chest and say, oh, this is the only one and everyone else is stupid, is wrong. So there's a lot we all don't know. And I can tell you, I'm one of them. We'll never figure out all the golden secrets to the heavens in astrology. I think divinity keeps that very much close to the vest. The fragment that we do know is profound, and it's going to keep growing. I think we'll get more and more knowledge as time goes on. But anyways, a lot of great comments here. Someone's mentioning Vega was a bright star in the sky in my region last night 12,000 years ago. It was sold. It was the North Star, right? Well, see, that's the precession of the equinoxes. You bet. And they say the pyramids at one time aligned with different fixed stars, and very interesting stuff. The all your ancient cultures were enamored with the heavens, not just because they were looking up and going, wowie zowie, look at those stars. But no, they knew that they were portals, and they knew that there were Egyptians, especially. There's a lot going on there that we don't know. So, yeah, look at here. Someone's saying 90% of the UFOs are coming from portals in the ocean. That's right. There's a lot coming out of the oceans. Yeah, I really agree with that. I've actually talked to military guys who said that they've been tracking them, and they come out of the ocean so fast they can barely measure the propagation speed between the time they leave the ocean and go out of the atmosphere. We got nothing that fast, nothing. And I can tell you, we have secret craft, and that was one of the topics this guy was mentioning last night. I didn't have any. I'm going to have Michael Shadd on because he'll do a better job. He's an absolute encyclopedia of and I'm going to put his link up too, so you can go to his website. He's an encyclopedia of events in ufology and whatever you want to call it, UAPology, whatever. But absolutely amazing. I was really enjoyed myself last night. I just couldn't get enough of it. So anyways, yeah, a lot of great comments here. I can only stay so long today, and hopefully I will be next Wednesday too live. But again, thanks for everybody for joining me, and some great comments here. Yeah, someone saying love is the most powerful word in the universe. I have to agree with that. Creation itself is such a divine thing. And again, everybody's got their own egoic center of who we think we are, right? But when you really look at life is pretty magical, and it's happening for us, not just to us. And I always say it's staying in a place of gratitude towards that. I always hear everybody complaining, oh, this happened to me, that happened to me. Well, that's true, and I agree. I've had a lot of stuff happen to me too that wasn't too pleasant. And don't we all have that? But I always drop back to, okay, control the mind. The mind is like a car. Try driving your car sometime and forget, don't do this with the Tesla because it'll drive. But if you drive the old-fashioned cars or a motorcycle especially, try not controlling it. Try not steering it and keeping it in alignment or braking. You'll be upside down in the ditch with the wheels pointing at the sky, or worse yet, you might not be here. So this is like the mind. We have to constantly correct and self-check our mind, stepping outside of ourselves. That's called conscience, right? Or consciousness. It's the ability to dial into checking your own emotions and feelings and reactions, which is the key. And, again, that is divinity. That is love. That's what you feel when you lose a pet or a loved one or anything else, And again, the world can make us really irritated and callous. But when you drop back to it all, it's all reaction. It's all reaction. And that's, again, full circle back to what I was talking about. This is the soul cauldron. And we are all here, I think, experiencing this kaleidoscope of emotions and experiences until we become more self-aware. The ancients used to have a society called the Stoics. And of course, you hear about the monks, you hear about the rabbis, you hear about the Tibetan lamas, you hear all these different, very advanced spiritual groups, the yogis in India, right? And they would all say, how do you feel if somebody likes you? And if someone said, oh, I like that, to feel good, right? How do you feel if someone hates you? Oh, I don't like that. I'll show them a thing or two. They said, you're not ready to be with us. And it's not that you become a zombie. It's just you don't react to all these emotions. You stay centered in the point of divinity. So that's not, again, being a zombie and not caring or taking medication and becoming zoned out. It's literally becoming self-aware, where you appreciate whatever's coming at you. But that's what they taught the great martial artists was, how do you react to adverse situations. You see, it's all the mind, it's all consciousness. And the same thing happens with astrology. I find people get the most out of their readings when we get to that point. It's like you got this happening to you. And sometimes we get some tough stuff. I mean, I talk to people having cancers, having violent things, criminal things, all these crazy stuff, legal things, and life can be a roller coaster ride. And sometimes it's even more than that. But, again, in the end, when you exit this meat suit called a body, what do you take with you? Your conscious self-awareness. That is the most important thing in the universe. So, yeah, someone's saying here, reason and data and knowledge is not wisdom. That's right. Oh boy, I'm glad you brought that up, Harriet. Harriet Boy said that. That is so true. There's an old saying. This scholar, this genius, went to see Buddha, right? And he's talking away about everything he knows, right? All his degrees and PhDs and everything. And Buddha said, "Do you want some tea?" And the guy said, "Oh, I'd love some tea." So Buddha's just pouring the tea, and it's running all over the table, and it's going down on their laps. And this guy goes, what the heck are you doing? He says, why are you filling this? He said, "That's you." He said, "You know so much in your lower consciousness that nothing else is available to come in." And see, that's a great thing she pointed out. Wisdom ain't knowledge. And the more we pack our brains with everything we think we know, and that's the same thing with astrology. That's what attracted me to Vedic astrology. Not that Vedic astrology is the sole best one, because trust me, medieval and traditional and classical astrology, there's so many different types of ways of looking at the heavens. It's really trying to gain wisdom about who you are and where you're going. Now, that's what's valuable. Not that you're a Pisces or an Aries or, etc. But we all get really, amazing things and challenging things happening to us. And it's good to know. It's like a surfer. If you see that wave you've been waiting for all your life coming in, you want to wax up the surfboard and get out there and ride it, right? For an analogy, right? Or you see a life peak coming, you prepare, you see? But in the end, it's all just an experience, not to minimize it, because I think the experience of life is stunning. When I look back, I have some that I'm not too happy about. I have some that I think were great, incredible. So, good point, really good point, that logic and data, and this is what humanity is going to teach itself the hard way if we're not careful, is AI. AI is all about intelligence and logic. And I can tell you, AI will outsmart us any day of the week in the lower level logical playing field, because it's fast, it's logical, it's unemotional. Well, that's not wisdom, is it? That's just handling data. And if we get evil people controlling that and trying to suppress, humanity, it's always going to backfire. Because the Vedas actually talk about that, how divinity sends down into creation fail safes. Call them angels, call them people, and it always blocks the destruction of this world. Not that it won't happen from time to time, but it's interesting. I was speaking to a guy last night at the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, and they were talking about how, I think it was his father was a commander at Maelstrom Air Force Base. And they literally, I've mentioned this many times, where they had these orbs come around the nuclear installations. And this happened in Russia too. It's happened in other places where the military says, we had these strange orbs, and afterwards nothing worked. We had to go in and repair it. See, so it wasn't just happenstance either. It was very intelligently done. And they knew that something was preventing an event that might have precipitated. And it's not that we couldn't have it, but I think it's prevented a lot because, anyways, I've got to run here because I've got another appointment I got to get to. But so many good comments, and I really appreciate you guys bringing them in. Utility is a great word for we are energy bodies. That's right. Yeah, I would agree with that. We definitely are. And again, that's why I mentioned reflexology and herbs are such amazing tools, cleansing the body of parasites, because it was a great thing I saw the other day on Instagram where this guy was talking about, he's a doctor. He's saying, we're finding parasitic eggs I had a friend of mine, got it almost 30 years ago now. He had welts all over his legs and abdomen, big, huge, like grapefruit tumors. And he went to the doctor. Well, we're going to have to cut those off, right? They're cancerous. He took wormwood, walnut hull tincture, green walnut hull tincture, and cloves. Within 2 weeks, they were down to golf ball size. Within just a little over a month, barely perceptible. And after that, they were gone. How about that? So again, I can't practice medicine, but I can tell you what I saw. It was pretty amazing. And, so the more we learn, and that's one of the benefits of social media. If you poke around enough, you'll find what's BS and what's truth. And some of this stuff is pretty amazing that's out there. And this is what they can't stop right now is the, again, expansion of knowledge. It's absolutely profound when you think about it. So many people are making many comments here. Say, hey, Jeff, when is the tariffs issue going to end? Well, that's a good question. I don't know. And I'm glad you brought that one up, back to the sewer of humanity, right? The government and politics in the world, right? But it is an issue because we do live in these systems. We all are banking and having money and buying things. And, the economy is really an important thing. And I get that this government shutdown is not going to resolve right away. And again, my view so far, and I looked at a chart on that, they're going to play this out a while longer. This could run out another couple of weeks yet, or hopefully not longer, but it didn't look fast. I'll look at timing. Timing's hard to get, but the tariff issue is huge because we're seeing China right now polarizing. They just, came back with all this rare earth stuff, and then Trump's smacking 100% tariffs on that. That's going to affect all of our goods. So this tug of war is going to go on for a while. This is relatable to the Uranus conjuncting Alcyon. See, again, the heavens always mirror the effects on the earth. This is disruption. And I think what it's going to do, I think it'll play itself out. I don't know. I'd really have to look at a chart, and I'm kind of out of time. But I can look at that. I'll cast a chart and bring it up next podcast, because if I get into that now, I'll be another 15 minutes minimum. And that's something I'd rather look at pretty carefully. But yeah, this is huge. And I think also, too, be very afraid if the Supreme Court strikes down Trump's ability to do tariffs. Now, I don't want to get into politics. I know everybody loves Trump and everybody hates Trump, right? It's never in the middle with him. And I can tell you, if this is allowed to go forward, which I think it will, that's what I got. Be very happy, because prior to 1913, when Woodrow Wilson rubber stamped the Federal Reserve Act, that's what presidents were using. And this country was exceedingly powerful and wealthy. And, if we don't have the ability to get trade balanced, even though right now it's a war going on and you're seeing some harsh reaction going back and forth between Trump and the other countries. But notice he makes trade deals. Again, I can't say anything positive about Orange Man or I'll get hate mail, but he just made certain trade deals that actually really put the United States in a much more powerful position. And again, I'll make a prediction that many of the rare earth accesses and mines are in lawsuits. Many of these judges have tied up, and there's been congressional things that have tied up the United States. The United States has more, I think, rare earth minerals than almost any other country, or certainly as much as many countries out there. And we weren't able to, and still aren't able to access it. And I think once that gets adjudicated and ironed out, you're going to see us become less dependent on other countries for rare earth minerals. That's a great place of investment too, I would say. Keep your eye out financially for when these things happen, because when they do, I'm going to tell you, you can make a fortune on investing into these mining companies. I know I've had a lot of clients in that business, and boy, when they hit, because you can get stock that soars to the moon. It's like a crypto that actually isn't a pump and dump, but like Bitcoin, right? That really works. So the point is, I think this is going to happen. And I think this is part of the turmoil we're seeing with the Uranus conjuncting Alcyon and also touching into the Pleiades. And this is all going to go on until next spring. This is very volatile. They want World War III. Who's they? The owners, the bankers at the top of the pyramid. Everybody says the president's the most powerful man in the world. I'll tell you what, the bankers are right up there with him. I'll tell you that, because they are doling out the money and they're funding both sides of everything. And they can read The Tower of Babel or The Great Taking or some other books that talk about this stuff. And, that it's always follow the money. So anyways, I've really got to run, but some great questions here. And people are commenting about AI and the terrace, the 12,000 year cycle, on and on. I wish I could stay, and I wish I could actually have everybody on and interact with them, but it's impossible to do. So everybody have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week on Wednesday. I couldn't make it last Wednesday, but this Wednesday I'll make it. So have a great one, and hang in there. And remember, it's your mind is the most powerful thing we own by far. Have a great weekend.